So being able to talk about codependency tonight and the concept around where does it come from? What forms it? Can I be codependent later in my life? Um, I could really teach on codependency for a whole week. Like it's that big. And when we've done series before, usually I try to get it into 4 weeks in a month because I'm neurospicy and that just sounds like it should happen, not because there's any logic behind it. So tonight I want to talk about kind of where it comes from and how it's formed so that you guys can start connecting the dots. It's really okay if you've heard a lot of this before. What I have found in my 17 years is the more I listen and the more open I am, the more I level up. And that's so not a recovery word. Don't Google that. It's just I feel like I level up. I feel like I am able to forgive a little bit more. I feel like I'm able to accept a little bit more. I color myself in a little bit more, and I'm less reactive. So that's how it shows up for me. So when we think about codependency, that's a really broad ass term that, let me remind you, is not in this big book called the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the Mental Health World. It is not considered a diagnosis, which prevents a lot of people from getting support, treatment, and help. Codependency from a broad view is on a continuum, like many things. And so some of us are enjoying life, throwing the parties, hosting all the parties, spending all the money for all the parties, cleaning up after all the parties. And then the other end of the spectrum is when within relationship, there's domestic violence. That's the most severe form of codependency. What happens with codependency that causes dysfunction is a loss of sense of self. So I'm going to tell a story and I'm going to speak in the I. And I want you guys just to notice what happens in your body. If you connect with anything, if you don't connect with it, that's a wonderful thing. And if there's just some dots that sound familiar to you that you can connect, almost like a, wow, the stars in the sky that make constellations. There we go. Whew, okay, major mommy brain today. I just wanted to see if you can connect the dots on whatever level of that continuum that it fits for you. Because as humans, we don't all have the same story. We don't all go down the same road to get to where we get to, but we do all experience shame and guilt, which are the main emotions of codependency. So in family of origin, some people are, like myself, I've mentioned before, born codependent. And what I mean by that is I was born to make my mom happy. She was having another child because she wanted something to make her happy and to make her smile. And if you think about that, that's a pretty big role and responsibility on a baby. And it's also pretty common. The dysfunction around that is the baby comes into the world needing to assimilate to the mom's life rather than the mom assimilating for the baby. Does that make sense? Like, rather than the baby having a schedule, rather than the baby having a nap schedule and a food schedule, the baby's out with mom at 10 o'clock at night at the Walmart. That's assimilating into mom's life rather than a mom assimilating into the baby's life. So in codependency, there is what's called an external locus of control. And when we're little, and this is present, what this looks like is the need to be aware of our environment or surroundings for some level of safety. For some people, that's physical safety. For other people, that's emotional safety. If you ask Amber's judgment, those two are equal. There's not one that's worse than the other. So a child needing to create emotional safety for themselves looks like I come home from school, I'm 6, 7, kindergarten, first grade, and I look at the bar to see how many cans of Busch beer are on the bar before I say a word. What I'm noticing is I can count how many he's had and I know how safe he is. If he's only had 4 or 5, he's funny. If he's had more than 7 or 8, it's bad, be quiet, don't go over there. That need to be so observant of my outside world develops what's called the external locus of control. It is the need for me to keep myself safe as a little one, even though that is not my job. And I don't even have all the brain function yet to be able to do that. That part of my brain doesn't even fully develop until 24 or 25. So the need as a little one to recognize safety and how to keep myself safe in a place where safety is supposed to be provided. Key point there. This isn't a place that I'm just going to visit. This is a place that I live, and I have to figure out how to keep myself safe from those that are supposed to be keeping me safe. The other way that this shows up is things like feelings, illness, emotional needs are very much an inconvenience. And what that looks like in families with codependency, numbing, and medicating is the unspoken rules of don't cry too loud or it'll make dad more mad. Or grandma or mom saying, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. What's actually happening is their bodies are getting louder and they don't know what to do because they're not emotionally available. And so they try to stop or control the feelings or the emotions. And what we learn is that feelings or emotions aren't safe. So what do? We begin to navigate our world by pleasing people. We figure out how to make people laugh. We figure out what people want. We figure out how, what I call it, that was very good at, is being a chameleon. You can put me in any room with any population of people, and I could show up the way that I needed to show up to be successful or effective in that environment. And behind closed doors, there's no close relationships. Nobody really knows what's happening. Nobody knows that my narrative on the inside is really, really bad. And on the outside, I just smile and say everything's great. That's a coping mechanism. It's a defense mechanism, because as long as I keep other people happy, then nobody needs to know what's going on inside me. But as long as I'm focused on other people, I don't have to focus on my own pain. So the loss of sense of self is because I'm focused outside of my body. And that goes all the way back to childhood for whatever reason. There was emotional unavailability somewhere in my childhood or everywhere in my childhood. Remember, it's on a continuum. And I learned that my needs weren't going to be met. My needs weren't important. And the way that my body shows needs is unsafe. So I show up to the world, the older I get, in some form or fashion of people pleasing, control addict, hero, mascot, being able to take care of things. Most of us coming into recovery are relationally traumatized. What does that mean? That means I don't know how to have healthy relationships. What does that mean? That means I can't know what I don't know. I just know there's a pattern. I'm a problem. I'm defective. And I'm on my 3rd marriage, or I've never been married. And there is this, I'm bad and everybody else is better than me. Relationships, what creates safety in relationships is reciprocity. So when there's codependency present, it only goes one direction. As a codependent, early recovery or pre-recovery, I was very responsible, super independent, dependent on no one for anything. And well, let's face it, that's how I was trained. I grew up on a farm. I know how to sustain life. I know how to change oil in my car before I could get a driver's license. So the um the responsibility that was placed on me as a little one says everyone else needs me and I can't need for anything. Well, what happens relationally the older I get is when I'm not wanted, I have to find a way to be needed. Let me say that again. When I'm not wanted, I find a way to be needed. If that sounds yucky, it is. Because it's that dysfunctional relational component that I never got. I was taught backwards how to show up in a relationship. In fact, I was taught not to be in relationship, but just to coexist. Does that make sense? To be in a room or a home with 8 people and still be lonely. To have parents present my whole life and still not feel affection or love. It's to coexist. It's not to be in relationship. So the older I get as an adult, the more dysfunctional that becomes because I can't know what I don't know. I am who I am because of where I come from. And the only reason I do know it is because whoever I'm in a relationship with is getting tired of it. And the roadmap to relationship is based on the relationship I have between me and me. So if I'm a codependent in relationship with another person, maybe they're in some level of recovery. What they're going to describe or feel is she's here, but she's never here. Like she's here, but she's never here. I can't feel her. There's no joy or connection. She just does things and she thinks that's what I want. But I just want her. It's the emptiness. I can't know what I don't know. And so what gets reflected back to me, I experience shame. Do you think I lean into that? No. As humans, we fight shame. Shame causes 2 reactions. It makes us shrink to like a fly on the wall where we hope no one can see us, or it causes us to bulk up and become the She-Hulk and like want to take somebody out. So when we get into those cycles relationally, it's not easy to exit out of. And let me remind you that as little ones, when we're forced to create our own safety for ourselves, please don't mistake that for someone who is dependent for survival. Because most of us are highly functioning, highly skilled corporate America. We're really good at what we do, and there's certain jobs that really feed off of that. There's articles written about hiring codependents. So in our present day, what shows up a lot for us and what can still get in the way, even in doesn't matter how many years of recovery, my backstory is still going to get triggered. I'm still going to be working on myself. And as I'm working on myself, and even my partner is working on himself, there's still going to be things that trigger us, that trigger our world. And that's some of the things you've heard me say. And I do not say this punitively. This is not an insult. This is a boundary. I really feel your pathology is affecting my recovery. That is a guideline. That is an agreed upon statement. That is not an insult. And basically what it's saying is there are some actions or reactions that you're taking that are a part of your pathology that's really affecting me staying in my recovery. And I really need you to take care of you. So many people that I work with today, long term, that's what we're working on. It's not that when I get into recovery, I'm never triggered. It's not that when I get into recovery, my relationships are beautiful. It's that I spend the rest of my life in recovery figuring out how to do relationships safely by not having to abandon me. I do to me what was done to me. When I was shut down because I had feelings, when I had emotionally unavailable parents, that's emotional abandonment. That's neglect. That's what I was taught to do, not feel. And so in present day recovery or relapse or pre recovery, what I know to do is abandon me in order to take care of everyone else. And what recovery teaches us, and what my team does, is how do I bring me with me and be in relationship? I work with a lot of couples where recovery is very developmental. So when we start in recovery, much like little ones, we can be really all or nothing and really black or white because we're trying to get to a place of stabilization, not because we're trying to fight with somebody else. We're in really early stages of learning ourselves and our body. And what happens is, as two people are on this parallel process, it becomes really egocentric, which is very typical and normal for young ones, right? That's developmentally appropriate. Well, that also happens with recovery because I'm learning who I am. So, how do I be in relationship with me and in relationship with my partner at the same time? It's quite challenging. It's very similar to, how do I parent my child and reparent me at the same time, right? So I hope this was helpful for you guys. I know last time I went backwards where we talked about late stage codependency, and this time I wanted to talk about how it evolves, because that is the recovery, that is the reparenting, right? Looking at, where did this originate and where did this come from, and what does that little one need? Because now that I'm in late stage recovery and recovery gives me the gift of self-awareness, now I can look back at, oh, I need to be nice to myself when I'm sick because I was told get up and go to school. Maybe I shouldn't work when I'm sick. Maybe I should be nice to myself and sleep. Or maybe I should take a break during the day instead of working 10 hours straight. Just because I work from home doesn't mean I can't take a break. In order to do the reparenting, we have to know where it comes from. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. I don't know if you guys identify with this or not, and I make up I wasn't the only one. I said more than a couple of times, okay, to my therapist. I've had a lot of therapists. I needed a lot. Let's just let's just cut to the chase. Let's just go to the hardest, worst one. Let's just excavate that shit out and fill it in with some good shit. Like, isn't that how it works? My need to control my pain was bigger than me. And I tell you, many of you have heard the story of the whole, don't tell me to breathe or count to 10 or I'll punch you in the face. I've never hit anyone in my life. And that's what it felt like. And I want to speak into that a little bit because it is so much about the tool for tonight and why I developed the treatment model at the HC the way I did. As long as I'm surviving, number one, I'm not thriving. Number two, I'm not feeling. And number three, I can't absorb anything. So it's frequently the example I use. If I'm in the middle of the ocean trying to stay alive, I can't tell you if I want Chick-fil-A or Bojangles. Like, literally that part of my brain is not on. And when we grow up in a home where there is an emotional deficit, and my program, ACA, Adult Child of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, it's not about blame and fault, it's about fact. Because the reality is my parents didn't even have it to give to me. They weren't withholding anything. And just because I'm in that state now, please don't be fooled, because I have not always been in this state. There was a long time that I was struggling to forgive that. And it's where I am today, and I'm very grateful. It's not about blame and fault, it is about fact. And when we think about external locus of control, when I'm out of my body, I'm not feeling. It's really hard for me to get grounded. It's really hard for me to meditate. In fact, I will tell therapists I can't do that whole meditation thing. Because what I've learned is an external locus of control. What I've learned is abandonment. Stay out here and control the shit you can control so that you don't feel the pain. So, the reason the treatment model is the way that it is, and the reason that we utilize coping skills in the sessions, it's because if I'm still in survival, I can't enter into recovery. If I can't acknowledge my story, if I can't tell my story, if I can't own my story, I'm still in a state of denial. That's not bad or wrong. That's a defense mechanism. And those fuckers are meant to keep us alive. No judgment. And in order for me to let my body know that I'm okay and I'm safe, I got to be able to be in it when I've spent most of my life out of it. I can do a whole other energetic component on this, but the highest form of intimacy is honesty with self. When I can't even own my own story, I'm not even seeing me. Remember what I said earlier when the silence? It's okay if this is uncomfortable if you're new to recovery because we're being seen and heard sometimes for the first time. And that's what I support so many people in going into the rooms around, because so much of what I heard, I make up, you guys might have heard this a few times. I don't want to go in there and listen to everybody complain about their life. Welcome. Because that's not really the point. And okay, wait, I see where you are. Been there, done that. And I'm seen and heard. I'm not punished for my feelings. I'm not told that I'm wrong, that that didn't happen. I'm heard. And that's what happens in these rooms. And that's so healing. However, I have to see me. I have to be honest. I said, I don't have any trauma. If you don't know me, I've done a lot of work around this, and I don't want to scare you with this statement. I feel the need to give that caveat. But guys, my parents, my dad took his own life, and I said to a therapist, I don't have any trauma. In full belief. Like that's the cray cray. Like that's how much denial I was in. And being able to recognize my own story is me seeing me. And how do we get there? How do we do that? Well, the first part of it is I got to feel to heal. I got to own my story. I got to tell my story. And so that's why these rooms even exist. Because if I can't grieve what she didn't get to grieve, I can't heal it. Right? So the tool that I want to offer you guys is, it is reparenting, but it's doing the things that help me stay in my body. It's not about the duration that I'm in there. Please hear me say this. This is so important, especially for ACAers. It's not about staying in there for an hour. That is not the goal. Somebody told you that? It's a lie. What is important is the frequency, the fact that I can come back home. I can do it 5 times a day and only for 2 minutes. That's huge. It's the frequency, it's not the duration. The more I come back home, the more I want to come back home. It's not forceful. And I'm not a project to be fixed, right? So, in order to feel and heal, I have to be able to grieve and tell my story. And I have to feel all the feelings that she never got a chance to feel. And so, for a lot of people, that looks and sounds like, I don't want to listen to everybody telling their story. You're not ready to tell yours yet. That's the problem, right? There is no internal locus of control. There is no awareness yet of, I got to feel to heal. So when you work with my team and you're doing things in session that look like stabilization, mindfulness, meditation, it's because number one, that reverses the effects of trauma on the brain. And number two, it's so much easier to get back into my body with someone I trust first than me to try to go back in all by myself when I don't know how the fuck to do that. So just know it is a practice. It is a muscle. The more I work it out, the stronger it gets. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. I'm going to try to do one more on this, but if you guys have more topics on it, I'll totally do it. You just let me know. And just the opportunity to do the opposite of what was done to me rather than abandon me. What happens if I lean into me? Thank you for showing up tonight. Thanks for showing up for me. Thanks for showing up for you and each other.